Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're really diving into something fundamental, aren't we? That big question. What makes us who we are as adults?
And specifically, how much of that story is written way back in our earliest years in childhood? It's a huge topic.
Yeah, huge. We've looked at a lot of material psychology, research findings, some really powerful real-life examples too.
And our goal today really is to cut through the noise, pull out the key insights for you.
So you can walk away with a clearer picture of how those childhood experiences can really forge the personality patterns we see in ourselves and others as adults.
Exactly. Let's start with the basics, maybe. What is personality?
Good point. It's essentially those characteristic ways we think, feel, and behave, the patterns that make you, well, you.
And psychologists often use a framework called the Big Five Traits to map this out.
Right, that's openness to experience, conscientiousness,
Extroversion, how outgoing you are, agreeableness,
and neuroticism, which is more about emotional stability or the tendency towards negative emotions.
Now, nature definitely plays a part. Twin studies suggest maybe 40 to 60% of the differences between us in these traits might come down to genetics.
Okay, so genetics gives us a kind of blueprint.
A baseline, yeah. But that still leaves a massive chunk influenced by something else.
And that's where the environment, especially childhood, comes in. It's this critical interaction, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. Your genes might set a potential, but your early experiences, they really shape how that potential gets expressed and refined. Nature and nurture working together.
Let's talk about the brain itself during that time. The first few years, especially up to age 5, that's often called a critical window, right?
Critical is definitely the word. The brain's plasticity, its ability to change and adapt is just incredible then.
It's forming connections at a staggering rate.
Yeah.
I read something like up to 1,000 new synapses per second in early infancy.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it? 1,000 per second. And certain brain areas are particularly sensitive during this period.
Like the prefrontal cortex, the bit involved in decision-making and impulse control.
That's a key one. And the amygdala, too, the brain's emotion center, they're really receptive to the signals they're getting from the environment.
So experiences aren't just memories, they're actually wiring the brain.
That's a great way to put it. They're literally building the neural pathways the brain will use throughout life.
So a nurturing environment, lots of warmth and responsiveness.
That helps lay down pathways for feeling secure, for emotional stability, maybe higher agreeableness. Research shows that kind of parenting can correlate with less anxiety later on.
And the opposite, a really stressful or chaotic childhood.
Well, that can have different effects. Chronic stress might keep the amygdala, that emotion center, constantly on high alert.
Leading to maybe more anxiety or impulsivity, higher neuroticism.
Potentially, yes. And some studies even suggest that chronic early stress might impact the development of that prefrontal cortex, making emotional regulation harder down the line, maybe leading to lower conscientiousness too.
We saw those contrasting examples, Anna and Mark. Anna, stable home, now reliable, calm under pressure.
Right, high conscientiousness, emotionally stable. Whereas Mark, who grew up with a lot of conflict,
Struggles more with anxiety, seems more impulsive at work. It really paints a picture.
it does. It highlights how those early environmental differences can lead to very different adult personality profiles.
So it's this constant back and forth between our genes and our world.
Exactly. It's bidirectional. Your genes might make you more sensitive to certain environments.
Like an outgoing kid thriving in a social setting, but maybe becoming withdrawn if isolated.
Precisely. And the environment can also influence how genes actually get expressed.
Which brings us to that fascinating study involving the serotonin transporter gene.
Yes, that was a landmark one. It showed that individuals with a specific gene variant who also faced childhood maltreatment were much more likely to develop issues like anxiety and depression.
So it wasn't just the gene or just the experience, but the combination.
The combination was key. A clear example of gene-environment interaction influencing traits tied to neuroticism.
And then there's epigenetics. This is different, right? Not changing the DNA sequence itself.
Correct. Epigenetics is more like dimmer switches or sticky notes on the genes. The environment can tell certain genes to turn up, turn down, switch on, or switch off without rewriting the basic code.
So experiences can literally change how our genes function.
They can alter gene expression. For instance, some research links warm maternal care early on to epigenetic changes that seem to dampen the stress response later, potentially lowering neuroticism.
And negative experiences could do the opposite. trigger changes that increase stress sensitivity.
That's the idea. Neglect or abuse might lead to epigenetic modifications that make someone more emotionally volatile.
It reminds me of that case study of the identical twins, Emma and Sophie. Same genes, but raised apart.
A really striking example. Emma, in the supportive home, grew up extroverted and confident. Sophie, in the neglectful one, became shy and anxious.
Shows how powerful nurture can be, even overriding a shared genetic starting point for things like extroversion or neuroticism.
It really does, and the timing of these experiences seems critical too, these sensitive periods we mentioned.
Right, not just for language, but for emotional and social skills too, especially in early childhood.
Yes, a big analysis found that consistent emotional support before age 5 was linked to higher agreeableness and conscientiousness later.
While chronic stress during that same window
Was linked to higher neuroticism and lower emotional stability. So when these things happen, matters. The brain is just so incredibly receptive then.
It really seems like the brain is being actively molded by that early world.
Setting patterns that can last a lifetime.
You know, this lines up really well with some big psychological theories. Attachment theory, for one.
Oh, definitely. Bowlby and Ainsworth's work. They showed that the bond with our primary caregiver is more than just comfort.
It's like a blueprint for future relationships and how we manage emotions.
Exactly that. And they identified those different attachment styles.
Secure, anxious, ambivalent, avoidant.
And disorganized. And each tends to correlate with different adult personality patterns.
So how does a secure attachment, say, play out later?
Secure attachment, usually born from consistent, responsive care, tends to foster confidence, empathy, emotional stability. Think higher agreeableness, lower neuroticism. These folks often have more stable relationships and better resilience as adults.
And the insecure styles. Anxious, ambivalent.
That often comes from inconsistent care. Adults might be anxious in relationships, maybe clingy, worried about rejection. That links strongly to high neuroticism.
And avoidant, from distant care.
They often learn to suppress emotions, avoid closeness. This can lead to lower agreeableness, maybe emotional detachment. Disorganized attachment, often linked to trauma, can result in more unpredictable behavior and higher neuroticism.
Like Lisa, the therapist example. Her secure attachment led to empathy, trust, high agreeableness.
Right. And contrast that with her client, Tom, whose anxious, ambivalent attachment from childhood shows up as jealousy and insecurity in his adult relationships, high neuroticism.
Then there's social learning theory. Bandura's idea that we learn by watching.
A huge piece of the puzzle. Children are like sponges, observing parents, siblings, peers, even media figures. They imitate behaviors, attitudes, emotional responses.
Especially if they see those behaviors getting results.
Exactly. Seeing calm conflict resolution teaches emotional regulation, good for conscientiousness. Witnessing aggression might teach impulsivity. Studies back this up. Kids who see prosocial behavior are more likely to be agreeable and empathetic adults.
Bandura also talked about self-efficacy, right? Believing you can do things.
Yes, your belief in your own competence. And that's heavily shaped by childhood being praised for effort, encouraged to try things. High self-efficacy fosters resilience, conscientiousness.
Like Carlos, who modeled his patient father and developed that calm, diplomatic style. High agreeableness, conscientiousness, and that sense of self-efficacy.
While his friend Miguel, from a more conflict-ridden home, struggled more with impulsivity. It shows the power of modeling.
Another really significant area is adverse childhood experiences, ACEs.
Yes, that research identified 10 types of childhood trauma abuse, neglect, household dysfunction, like substance abuse or domestic violence.
And the findings are stark. Higher ACE scores linked to more problems later.
Significantly higher risks for health problems, both physical and mental. And in terms of personality, higher ACEs consistently correlate with lower conscientiousness and higher neuroticism. One study found people with 4 or more ACEs were much more likely to show impulsivity or emotional instability.
What's happening biologically during ACEs?
Chronic stress throws the body's stress response system, the HPA axis, out of whack. It can lead to ongoing anxiety, impact brain development relevant to impulse control, and deeply erode trust and self-worth.
Making it hard to form secure bonds later.
Definitely. But, and this is important, protective factors like a supportive adult can make a huge difference. They can buffer those negative effects.
Like Emily, who had multiple ACEs but found resilience through a supportive teacher.
A perfect illustration that the trajectory isn't fixed.
And Erik Erikson's stages also fit in here.
They do. He saw development as stages with key challenges. The childhood ones trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame, initiative versus guilt, industry versus inferiority lay groundwork.
So successfully navigating those helps build positive traits.
Right. Building trust, independence, initiative, competence, these contribute to emotional stability, agreeableness, extroversion, conscientiousness. Struggling can lead to mistrust, shame, inferiority linked to low self-esteem, higher neuroticism. Research connects success in these early stages to higher extroversion and conscientiousness later on.
Okay, let's zoom in on family dynamics. That first classroom for personality.
It really is the incubator. Parents, siblings, the whole family system, they shape our sense of self, how we handle emotions, our social skills.
And parenting styles seem particularly crucial. We talked about authoritative, authoritarian.
Permissive and neglectful, too. Each tends to nudge personality in different directions.
Authoritative, warm, but with clear boundaries. That sounds like the gold standard.
Often linked to the best outcomes, yeah. Independence, self-discipline, emotional stability. High conscientiousness, openness, agreeableness, lower neuroticism, generally higher life satisfaction.
Oprah Winfrey's story comes to mind, that mix of strictness and love, building incredible resilience and drive.
A powerful example. Then authoritarian high demands, low warmth.
Sounds like it could breed anxiety.
Often does. Anxiety, low self-esteem, maybe rigidity or perfectionism, higher neuroticism, sometimes emotional suppression.
Like John, the engineer whose parents demanded perfection, he's super conscientious but battles anxiety and imposter syndrome. High neuroticism there too.
Clear link. Then permissive, lots of warmth, few rules.
Potential for impulsivity. Low self-discipline.
That's common. Lower conscientiousness. Interestingly, sometimes higher creativity and openness, but often struggles with structure, like deadlines.
Like Sarah, the creative but disorganized teacher.
Exactly. And finally, neglectful, lacking both warmth and structure.
That sounds really tough.
It can lead to significant challenges. Emotional instability, deep mistrust, low self-worth. Often high neuroticism, low agreeableness. Difficulty forming connections.
Michael, the writer who experienced neglect, became reserved, mistrustful.
The impact is clear, but it's not just parents. Siblings are huge too.
Our first rivals, allies, role models. What about birth order? Does that really matter?
It can play a part, though it's not destiny. Firstborns sometimes get more initial focus, maybe more responsibility, potentially leading to higher conscientiousness or leadership traits.
While younger siblings might need to be more rebellious or creative to stand out.
Sometimes, yeah. Middle children often become skilled negotiators, quite agreeable. Studies show some tendencies: firstborns higher on conscientiousness, laterborns on openness or risk-taking.
Like Elon Musk, the driven firstborn.
His traits align with some of those firstborn tendencies. Compare him to his brother.
Or the Rodriguez sisters, Maria, the responsible older one, Sophia, the adventurous younger one. Same family, different rules.
Shows how those dynamics shape things. And don't forget extended family and culture.
Grandparents, aunts, uncles, reinforcing values.
Definitely, especially in cultures where they're very involved. They provide support, model behavior. Think about collectivist cultures emphasizing harmony that fosters agreeableness, stability.
Like Aisha, in the multi-generational Pakistani household, learning cooperation and respect. High agreeableness and conscientiousness came from that.
It shows how the whole system, embedded in culture, shapes us.
Okay, moving outside the family, what about peers? That social laboratory.
Crucial. Friends, classmates, that's where you learn to navigate social hierarchies, manage conflict outside the family, and build self-esteem based on how others see you.
Peer acceptance feels massive during childhood and adolescence.
It is. Acceptance builds confidence, social skills, often boosts extroversion. Rejection can lead to social anxiety, withdrawal, low self-esteem. Long-term studies show chronic rejection links to higher neuroticism and lower agreeableness in adulthood. Acceptance links to the opposite.
Like Maya, who was bullied and became shy and cautious initially.
Yeah, high neuroticism, low extroversion from that rejection, but then finding her place in the art club, that acceptance fostered confidence and openness. It was transformative.
And Liam, the popular kid, who leveraged that early confidence into sales success.
His extroversion and social skills were honed early on by those positive peer interactions. And peers are models too, right? We learn from them.
Copying friends' behaviors or attitudes.
Absolutely. Hanging out with pro-social peers,
Yeah.
linked to higher agreeableness and empathy, running with a delinquent crowd, linked to more impulsivity, lower conscientiousness.
Like Jamal, whose friends valued achievement and service, shaping his conscientious activist path.
While his cousin's rebellious peer group influenced a more risk-taking personality, the peer culture matters.
And that peer culture often reflects the broader societal culture.
It does. Collectivist peer groups emphasize harmony, reinforcing agreeableness. Individualistic ones might value self-expression, competition, fostering extroversion or assertiveness. We see these differences in cross-cultural studies.
Priya, in her Indian American community, valued group harmony, high agreeableness.
While Ethan, in a competitive American peer group, became more assertive and extroverted.
And bullying is a particularly damaging form of peer interaction.
Hugely damaging. Victims often suffer from higher neuroticism, lower self-esteem. Bullies might show low agreeableness, high impulsivity, and kids who are both bullies and victims often show the highest levels of adult neuroticism.
Chloe, bullied for her weight, initially withdrew.
But finding that supportive theater group helped her rebuild confidence and develop deep empathy, turning that pain into purpose in her counseling work.
Okay, let's broaden the lens again. Socioeconomic status and the wider culture. How do they fit in?
They form the backdrop for everything else. SES income, education, occupation shapes the resources, stressors, and opportunities a child experiences. Culture provides the norms and expectations.
So lower SES might mean more stress.
Often, yes. Instability, insecurity can contribute to higher neuroticism. But it can also build incredible resilience and resourcefulness, especially with strong support systems.
And higher SES, more opportunities.
Generally, yes. More enrichment can foster openness, conscientiousness, but high-pressure environments can also breed anxiety and perfectionism, contributing to neuroticism, too. Studies link middle-high SES to higher extroversion and conscientiousness, maybe from more stimulation.
We saw that with Maria, low-income Chicago, stress led to caution, neuroticism, but her mom's support fostered a strong work ethic, conscientiousness.
And Ethan, from the affluent suburb, confident, ambitious, extroversion, conscientiousness, but deals with pressure-induced anxiety, different contexts, different blends of traits.
And culture overlays all of this, collectivist versus individualistic norms.
Shaping everything from agreeableness to extroversion. Collectivist cultures value harmony, duty fostering agreeableness, conscientiousness. Individualistic ones value self-expression, independence fostering extroversion, openness.
Research shows these differences quite clearly across societies.
And culture even shapes emotional expression. Some encourage restraint, potentially linked to lower neuroticism. Others encourage expression, maybe amplifying extroversion or even neuroticism.
Like Priya, again, high agreeableness from her Indian American background, but struggles asserting individual needs sometimes.
And Liam, the assertive, extroverted Australian, shaped by an individualistic culture, but his competitiveness can cause friction.
And SES and culture interact too.
Definitely. A low SES collectivist family might double down on unity for coping, boosting agreeableness. A low SES individualistic family might push self-reliance, maybe fostering extroversion, but also potential isolation and anxiety.
Like Javier, low SES Mexican-American family, strong familismo fostered empathy and agreeableness, even amid stress that showed up as anxiety.
It's always a complex mix of these layers.
Let's revisit ACE's adverse childhood experiences, maybe in a bit more detail, because the impact seems so significant.
It really is. We know higher ACE scores are linked to poorer mental and physical health, and specifically for personality, lower conscientiousness, and higher neuroticism.
You mentioned the biological impact, the stress response system.
Right, that chronic activation of the HPA axis, the elevated cortisol. It affects brain development, particularly areas like the prefrontal cortex needed for self-control and emotional regulation.
Which explains the link to impulsivity and emotional instability with higher ACE scores.
Exactly. And psychologically, ACEs erode trust, safety, self-worth. They often lead to insecure attachment patterns that carry into adulthood, neglect fostering avoidance, for instance.
But protective factors can change the outcome.
Hugely important. Supportive relationships are key buffers. We saw James, who experienced abuse and parental substance abuse, struggled with high neuroticism and trust. But mentorship and therapy helped him build empathy, resilience, even higher agreeableness eventually. And Amina, dealing with neglect from an alcoholic parent, became mistrustful and introverted, high neuroticism, but found an outlet and openness through art.
And it's not always negative. What about resilience and post-traumatic growth?
A critical point. Adversity doesn't automatically lead to maladaptive traits. Many people show incredible resilience, and some experience post-traumatic growth, finding new strength, compassion, determination, creativity because of what they went through.
What helps people achieve that growth?
Supportive relationships are huge. Therapy is often crucial. Developing a sense of agency that you can influence your life. Studies show many people with high ACEs report this kind of growth, often showing higher openness and resilience.
Malala Yousafzai is such a global example of turning extreme trauma into advocacy and strength.
An incredible example. And Tara, facing divorce and abuse, used therapy and her aunt's support to build resilience and empathy, transforming her initial struggles.
So those protective factors, a stable adult, community support, they're absolutely vital.
They can literally change the trajectory. Just one stable adult can have the likelihood of negative outcomes, even with high ACEs. They foster resilience, emotional regulation, adaptive traits.
Like Malik, finding stability through his grandmother and a youth program, despite neighborhood violence.
His story shows the power of those buffers.
Okay, what about influences outside family and peers, like school and mentors?
They play a big role too. Teachers, coaches, community leaders, they offer guidance, encouragement, opportunities. They can reinforce positive traits and buffer negative influences.
Teachers can be real catalysts for change.
Absolutely. They foster curiosity, discipline, social skills. A supportive teacher can boost self-efficacy, leading to higher conscientiousness and openness. Research shows a link between supportive teachers and better adult outcomes. Negative interactions, sadly, can do the opposite.
Einstein credited a teacher with nurturing his curiosity, that core of openness.
And Sophia, with dyslexia, found resilience and openness thanks to an understanding teacher, shaping her journalistic drive.
Mentors outside school are important too. Coaches, family, friends.
Hugely important, especially for kids lacking support at home. They model positive behaviors, offer emotional support. Studies show kids with mentors, especially in risky environments, tend to develop higher agreeableness and resilience.
Like Diego, whose soccer coach taught him discipline and teamwork, fostering conscientiousness and agreeableness he now models as a coach himself.
That ripple effect is powerful, and the school environment itself matters the culture.
How so?
Inclusive, supportive schools tend to foster emotional stability, agreeableness. Highly competitive or punitive ones might increase neuroticism. Collaborative settings seem linked to higher extroversion and conscientiousness.
Like Nadia, thriving in a collaborative school, becoming open and cooperative. Her friend in a pressure cooker school became more anxious.
The whole learning environment leaves its mark.
So we have this foundation laid in childhood. How does it all play out in adulthood? Does it just continue?
It interacts with everything else. Adulthood brings new experiences, relationships, challenges. It gives us chances to reinforce those early patterns, yes, but also to modify them, even overcome them. It's not a fixed destiny.
Careers seem like a big area where these traits show up.
Definitely. High conscientiousness, maybe nurtured early on, strong predictor of achievement, leadership roles, high neuroticism from ACEs, might create challenges for stability unless it's addressed.
Like Sarah, with the permissive upbringing, who consciously worked on her conscientiousness with mentorship to balance her creativity.
Or Raj, whose disciplined upbringing led to high conscientiousness and extroversion, propelling his career, but he needed tools like mindfulness to manage the accompanying perfectionism. It shows adaptation.
And romantic relationships feel like a direct echo of those early attachments.
Very much so. Secure attachment fosters stable, trusting partnerships. Insecure styles often replay early patterns, anxiety leading to jealousy, avoidance leading to distance. Securely attached people report more satisfying relationships.
John, with anxious attachment from authoritarian parents, needed therapy to overcome trust issues.
While Elena's secure attachment fueled her empathetic, stable personality, benefiting her marriage and her therapy practice, high agreeableness, low neuroticism,
And our engagement with the wider community. Social networks.
also shaped by childhood. Supportive, collectivist upbringings often lead to higher agreeableness, more community involvement. Pro-social childhood experiences link to more volunteering and stronger networks later.
Amara, from that community-focused family, becoming an effective nonprofit director.
Her adult engagement reflects those early values.
So circling back to nature versus nurture, it's really about the interaction.
That's the consensus now. Genes provide the potential, the environment, especially in childhood, profoundly shapes how that potential unfolds.
And epigenetics shows how the environment can talk to our genes.
Exactly. Stress might suppress regulatory genes, nurturing might enhance resilience genes. It's a mechanism for that interaction.
The Chen twins, raised apart, showing how different environments create different personalities from the same genes.
A powerful illustration, or Noah, with a genetic risk for anxiety, but whose supportive childhood fostered stability, mitigating that risk. It's the interplay.
Which leads to the big hopeful question, can we change? Can adults rewrite the script?
Yes. Emphatically, yes. We aren't prisoners of our past. Therapy, self-awareness, new experiences, they allow for real change.
Things like cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Very effective. It helps identify and change negative thought patterns often rooted in childhood. Studies show it reduces neuroticism, boosts emotional stability, especially after trauma.
Like James using CBT to manage anxiety from abuse, reframing his beliefs.
Mindfulness is another powerful tool. Meditation, awareness practices.
Helping regulate emotions, reducing neuroticism.
Precisely. It builds awareness and control, linked to increased stability and conscientiousness, especially helpful for those with ACEs.
Priya used it to balance her agreeableness with assertiveness.
And for specific trauma, therapies like EMDR can be transformative.
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, helping process those difficult memories.
Yes, reducing their emotional charge, building resilience, shown to reduce neuroticism, increase agreeableness after high ACEs.
Amina used EMDR to work through neglect, improving her trust and openness.
And never underestimate the power of social support in adulthood.
Building positive connections now to counteract negative early ones.
Absolutely. Supportive friends, groups, mentors, they provide validation, support, practice for healthier relating, linked to increased emotional stability.
Like Malik, continuing to benefit from mentorship and community, reinforcing his resilience.
All these examples show that while childhood shapes us profoundly, adulthood offers real opportunities for growth and change.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, childhood is clearly a master architect of adult personality.
Through family, peers, culture, SES, adverse experiences, it all weaves together.
And the stories we touched on, Maria, Malala, Einstein, James Jama, they illustrate how those early influences echo through our adult lives.
But the key takeaway really is that the story isn't finished. Understanding the past gives us power in the present. Interventions work. Change is possible.
We can learn to rewrite the script, turning challenges into different kinds of strengths. Childhood lays the groundwork, but adulthood provides the tools to build upon it, to reshape it.
So, maybe a final thought for you listening. Consider your own personality. Can you trace aspects of it back to certain childhood moments, relationships, or environments? And how might that understanding empower you moving forward?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into how childhood shapes who we become. We hope it's given you some valuable insights.
Please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.